I'm Kathleen Francis, and I'm hosting another interview for Sedona Daily Planet. And this young lady, beautiful as she is running also for the mayor of Sedona. So with that, we welcome you to this interview, and we were very curious about finding out more about what you feel qualifies you to be the Sedona mayor.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Yes,
I'm happy
indeed.
to answer any of your questions.
Good.
Yeah.
So tell us, what is your qualifications basically for?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. You know, when you go to register to run for mayor, all you need to do is be able to sign your name and get enough signatures. So qualifyingly speaking, I think any of us can run, and many more of us should actually consider running, because it's sort of, we've come to this consciousness where it's like such a precious realm that only a select few can participate in, and you have to have this type of quote-unquote experience to get there. And really all you need is to be a human being who understands your community and willing to stand up and withhold the punches that will inevitably come at you, because not everyone's going to agree on things. But you know, my family's been here since the 90s, since 94. I graduated from high school here. I understand the ethos of a small, beautiful, sacred community, and I seek to preserve that. So those are really my qualifications in that regard. I'm very much against bringing in federal funds or federal government or expanding to a larger government. I think it's essential that we keep our community quaint, small, unique, develop consciously where possible so that we don't implode on ourselves, and be really thoughtful about how we stay competitive in this world that we're existing in, which is very turbulent right now. So I think that entails having creativity, having a lot of experience in the world. I'm world traveled. I was born in Japan. I lived in Tokyo and Kyoto, Humboldt County, Palm Desert, Hawaii. I was in Los Angeles for 20 years. I saw the policies out there that destroyed it, and I saw policies that were beneficial to the community. So I'm bringing all of that real life experience to my small town, which I have great respect for. So in terms of qualifications, I think I have many. I'm a heart-centered person that regards the differences of people's of opinions with excitement. You know, I enjoy, and I talk about this all the time, and I'll bring her up again because I just saw her, Kathy Consuela. You know, we don't always agree, but we can respect one another and hear each other, and that's essential for a thriving community.
Wow, that was very articulate and very well spoken. And I certainly think that Sedona wants and craves someone with your passion. And I know that your background, you graduated from Red Rock High School.
I did, yes.
And then you went on into the entertainment industry. And coming from an entertainment background myself, I was vice president of one of the biggest independent film companies, Hemdale, who did Terminator and Platoon. And
wait, I didn't know that. Terminate Sarah Connor. Okay, Sarah Connor and Sigourney Weaver are my all-time favorite female leads. Aliens and Terminator are essentially how I live my life. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Well, I wasn't actually there when they
Oh my
produced
gosh.
that. I came at the very end.
Okay, yeah.
But I recently looked at Terminator again, and it was
Scary,
eerily
similar.
It was so
parallels
pathetic that
many
it was
things.
like, oh my God.
Yeah, a lot of sci-fi does.
Oh my goodness. So, you know, I mean, I think where your heart is wonderful.
Thank you.
And I know that you're involved also with the greenhouse project. What's your involvement
Yes,
there?
so I when I moved back to Sedona a year and a half ago at the beginning of 2021, I saw, you know, there's people who in town who speak, and then there's people in town who speak and follow through. And that's what Sedona Greenhouse Project is. And especially with the supply chain shortages that we're witnessing, workforce shortages that we're witnessing, it's really essential to, especially the location of where we are in Arizona, you know, in terms of transport to resources, that we are able to thrive and be sovereign in terms of food sovereignty without a supply chain that may or may not go down. And then we're thinking like consciously too about the environment. Why truck in edibles, foods, nutrients when we can grow it here? And it's the Verde Valley for a reason. We've got
Yeah.
the water as long as we get to keep our rights, right? And so, watching them thrive and continue to grow is such a beautiful thing. I fully support what they're doing. They're educating the community. They're changing the way tourism is operating out here in some regards too, because people are coming out to volunteer for the Sedona Greenhouse Project.
Wow.
It's really wonderful, and they're strong community members. It gives people purpose, and feeding a community is a very important purpose.
Yeah, extremely so under our current strange world conditions.
That's right.
That
Yeah.
we're feeling so vulnerable to.
Right.
So you're taking on a very good cause with regard to that, and there's always a struggle in Sedona between the tourism businesses and the community, the residents that live here.
Yeah, and I don't think that there needs to be. I think we're one and the same, and what we need is balance. And historically, in the last 10 years, we've had such discord, and and I say this, how often we hear as residents, well, you should be happy about tourism, it pays for your quality of life. And we're like, no, actually it doesn't. If the money was being allocated towards things that improved our quality of life, then yes, absolutely. And I think that's the difference, is like right now, our money from the tax revenue of tourism is going to things that allegedly will benefit tourism, which I don't even think it does, because tourists don't want to ride on a bus. And that's where the money is going right now, right? There's a robust transit system, more sidewalks, more parking lots. That doesn't improve anybody's quality of life. In fact, that breaks down the quality of the tourist industry in regards to they don't come here for this rural experience and then to be slapped in the face with San Francisco parking structures.
Ah.
So I think there's a bird.
So
Okay. I think there's a way to bridge.
So tell me, do you lean more as Democrat, Republican? What's
Yeah,
where
it's
you're at?
funny. I really I considered myself an independent for 20 years, and then as 2020 happened, it was revealed to me that I was conservative in terms of I'm very much for small government, local control, and freedom, independence, sovereignty, and the definitions of Republican, liberal, Democrat, conservative have all shifted so drastically in the last year. As far as parties go, I really see it as two wings of the same bird, and it's just flapping destruction all over the place. So I was excited to see, so I do identify as a constitutional conservative. I am very much about freedom, equal rights, liberty.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. I was excited to see that the mayoral position in any of the local council positions are supposed to be nonpartisan. But of course, with what's happened nationally, it certainly paints a perspective of who I am or who anyone is if you identify with one party. I don't, and I never have identified with the Republican Party. I am registered as a Republican because you have to vote some way. But yeah, I'm a conservative.
That's a very good way to explain.
I'm toying with libertarian too, just to be completely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the tourism situation, what is your position about the off-road vehicles, the OHVs?
Yeah. Again, so when you ask me anything, I'm always going to go back to balance. Because I believe in private industry being able to thrive, but they also have a responsibility to our community to protect it.
Samaire, the residents of this community are very concerned about overcrowding, the Tlaquepaque traffic that's jammed up, the OHVs that are now dominating the landscape. What's your solution for these things?
So I went to speak with one of the OHV companies, one who cares about the community, and thankfully there is some new technology that sounds hopeful. They do feel, this particular company, Sedona ATV, feels a responsibility and the burden of the impact that the over tourism, mass tourism has had in the last 2 years. And there's a new technology that Polaris is working with them on to sort of geo-fencing that would stop the speed of the ATV on certain locations, and so the speed and where they go. So if that is something that's viable, we could have a really great solution. We have to somehow keep the market operating in a way that is fluid, but not in a way that will allow for enough space for people to go rogue. And that's the trouble, right? So
That is the
yes,
trouble.
yes. So it's about that balance, finding those solutions. And I think that the pressure from the community has been significant enough to actually motivate Polaris to do something. And I'm very much for private industry being able to thrive, so I wouldn't want to be like, no, you can't operate here, but you need to operate responsibly. That's what we have to figure out, what that looks like. And there's a lot going into that right now. But the community has had a great impact in that regard. Mm-hmm. So we just have to keep that pressure. I think there's a lot of community members who also like ATVs, and like that freedom. So we got to bring them all to the table and find the solution together.
Mm-hmm. Because I know even the wheels on the ground, when you break the land itself, people don't realize that the ground itself can really be damaged.
The desert is one of the most delicate ecosystems.
Exactly.
And the luxury of the Jeep tours was that you had a encapsulated group of tourists who were being educated while they were adventuring.
That's right.
And so
that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And the Forest Service is given revenue for every single person that's in that Jeep. I don't know if a lot of people realize that, but those permits are very critical permits, and they are to support the forest. Now, another real big issue, the Airbnbs.
Yeah. Yes.
What's your position on that?
So again, balance. I went to a particular council meeting, I think you might have been there, when local short-term rental owners were saying, because I have a short-term rental, I'm able to survive and live in Sedona. You don't want to take away from those people, but you do want to make sure and protect the community, which is basically being pushed out right now.
The community, yes, because what's happening is people that don't live here are buying up
As
homes
investment
and turning them
properties.
into their own little private hotels.
Yes.
So it makes it difficult, to have that balance, because you can't. How do you regulate something like that?
Well, one of the things I think we need to seriously consider is looking at the shared revenue from the state and how much that would be. Are we willing to get sued to stand up for our community? What's that going to look like? The other good caveat is that both governor candidates have said that they're going to work towards giving the control back to the city. And now, if that's true, they are politicians, so who knows if that's true or not. But that would make, there's endless amounts of solutions to mitigate the issue as long as we have control. And that's something we need to work towards continuously. But then also come up with creative solutions. So allegedly, our housing shortage right now is 1,600 units. So how do we get that back? Not necessarily from the short-term rental market, but how do we make that accessible to our workforce or more affordable? I mean, the prices. I left Los Angeles. I was like, oh, I'm going to come back home and be able to. And boy, was I hit with a slap in the face. But so those are creative ideas that we have to come up with, whether it be ADU dwellings, changing the codes. Right now, we have international building codes in Sedona that make it impossible to build affordably, because you need to build an enclosed garage with every new build. Before, it used to just be carports.
Right.
So now that's an extra cost of $30,000, $60,000 depending. You also need to have an electric vehicle outlet, solar power wiring.
Oh my goodness.
It's just so out of reality. So there's things in place right now that we need to walk back, that we can walk back, to create more balance towards the workforce or affordable housing.
Well, I hear you say balance repeatedly.
Repeatedly.
And so, that is something that I think any mayor would have to really have that intention in your position. Now, in relating to that, the water issue.
Yes, the water issue is so. I cannot get a straight answer. I went to the water source and they said, no, our aquifers are great. We've got tons of water. Then I spoke with other people who said, actually, our wells had to drill 200 feet lower to access the water. I'm still learning that in that regard. And actually, if I could sit down with you and get a lot more information on it, that would be helpful. But, that's something we have to consider when developing. Do we have the water resource to sustain the amount of people here?
Right.
But that's an answer I haven't gotten to the bottom of yet.
But it sounds like you're someone that will go after
Oh,
these
for
answers.
sure, yes. It's essential.
So, am I right that you're not favorably inclined to have that parking garage built up in Sedona?
No, I think, I understand that a lot of businesses want that parking garage. I think there's a way to do it to see first. So I don't trust that the solutions that have been created with the Sims project are going to be successful. So we're putting a lot of money towards something that I don't have a lot of faith in personally. Now, I don't know why you would put a parking structure in the middle of a congested area and expect it to ease traffic, not just bring in more traffic. So now we have this parking spot for the trail shuttles in the center of town, so you're bringing all the cars to the center of town and you've got these buses going back and forth. I don't understand how logically that takes cars off the road, which is theoretically why they did it. So now they're putting rocks on Dry Creek to stop that. I guess Back Beyond has had more success because there's not as much traffic there, so perhaps it works better there. But the initial idea for this parking structure in Uptown, it was earmarked for $9 million, and now it's 18. So
Wow.
And so when I went to the parking garage presentation, they said the purpose of that parking garage was to get the cars off the side of the street, which I've never heard anyone complain about. Locals up there who live up there, and they themselves were like, I've never said that. I've never said that I'm so upset by these cars on the side of the street. Now, 260 parking spots. We were told at that presentation, the point is to objectively be able to control people, how they go and when they go. So it's not just the parking garage, it's the bus transit system that they're going to put in place along with it.
Wow.
So,
I didn't know about that.
Well, not a lot of people do, and that's the really frustrating part. Is there's a whole plan in place to change the transit flow of Sedona, and I don't believe it's that easy to transition human beings from independent, sovereign, car-driving individuals into sort of the social new forum to get people to get on. They're vacationing on a schedule. It doesn't happen. We're not New York City. I don't even think people use the bus in New York City on vacation. Perhaps the trains, but we're 19 square miles. A robust transit system with federal funds and state funds does not, to me, fit the ethos of Sedona. It's not a solution. We need a solution, but I don't believe the transit system and $18 million parking structure is the solution.
That figure was, I just discovered that
It's
figure.
a punch in the stomach.
It's
Yeah,
definitely, and that's coming out of the budget. And
part of our budget. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Speaking of budgets, there is a concern about the city's emergency evacuation
Yeah.
difficulties.
Yes. So if any transit modification were to be developed, it should be, how do we get out of here? Not how do we get more people in here. I mean, that's what, they sort of pat themselves on the back and say, well, we figured out how to create the flow of traffic from Flagstaff in more successfully. You're like, great, how do we get out? So yes, that is something. Pardon?
Not that way.
Not that way. Yeah, but it's a miss to put our mind towards the momentum of tourists without considering how are we going to get these tourists and residents out when, God forbid, something happens, which we have been in the midst of several times now. For the last 2 years, there's been fires right around the corner.
Yes.
And then, of course, 179 whenever there's an accident and it's backed up for hours.
Yes.
But the problem is, I'm preaching to the choir. I'm sure everyone who's listening is like, yes, of course, that's what we need. But what do we do? What we have to do is become somewhat flexible in our perception of how the city operates and looks. Because right now, a lot of us are saying, well, yeah, we need a solution, but not in my neighborhood, right?
It's always that.
It's always that, right?
Very good. All right. Samaire, one of the things that I know citizens maybe don't know, and I know it is important for them to know, what are some of the powers that a mayor has in Sedona?
So a mayor has no more voting power than any council member except in a time of an emergency. And we saw that in 2020 when Mayor Sandy declared an emergency and shut the businesses down. That is something she can do without the say of council. So God forbid something happens again. We want someone at that helm who has a very broad perspective on what freedom means, what responsibility means, and pray that they make the right choice in that regard. Personally, I don't think that shutting the business down was the right choice. And I think a lot of businesses probably agree because I don't think they shut down. But even having to wear masks or that's an important thing to consider going forward.
Wow, I'm glad we clarified that. Now, speaking of which, you were on the Steve Bannon War Room, and that was relating to masks, correct?
Yes, so I know a lot of people in the community are either upset or curious about my appearance on Steve Bannon's War Room. You can find it online. Anything that I've done in regards to appearing on his show was in regards to parental rights and allowing for mass choice for children at school. So we were at a point in 2021 when the state left it up to the district to decide whether or not they needed to wear masks, and there was no conversation being had. My son would come home from school and just this filthy germ trap on him. It was getting hotter out. It was becoming very intolerable. He couldn't do it anymore. Now, I went to the school, started going to the school boards and asked, for consideration to allow for mass choice, and they were not necessarily open to hearing that. Thankfully, his teacher was very supportive of that because she dealt with the kids. She saw what they had to go through. So one day in particular, I said I would be out there protesting for mass choice, and I said that half the school would be with me, and that's, as it turned out, very much true. Half the school was really advocating for their children to be able, for them as parents to decide what their children's health choices would or wouldn't be. And I respect a parent's choice to require their child to wear a mask, though I don't agree with it, but it should be a choice of the parent. And actually, in the Parental Bill of Rights for Arizona, we have that choice. And in this time of emergency, they took that right away from us. So I went out, I spoke out, and it caught some, I guess, views online. And Steve Bannon asked me to come on and speak to that. And at that time, nationally, that was a very big topic for parents.
Mm-hmm. Very understandable. As we all know, our right to do a lot of things is kind of disappearing.
It is, yeah.
And that's something that concerns all of us.
Yes.
Now, speaking of which, Sedona's sustainability staff, what do you think about that?
The staff? I actually really like Alicia. I think she's very open to hearing the genuine desires of the community. I don't think necessarily that the council reflects the genuine desires of the community. I think they reflect a element of it, but I've spoken with her. Sedona Greenhouse has spoken with her. I have a good feeling that if we all are able to come to the table and converse, she'll really be able to put into place regenerative ideas, not just quote unquote sustainable, which in my opinion is more greenwashing. And there's numerous amounts of definitions for what sustainability means.
Oh yeah.
And so I think for our beautiful little sacred community, we have a unique need that can't be met by templates from other nations or cities, and that's what's happening right now. Well, this is what's working in San Francisco, although I could argue that nothing is working in San Francisco. But, I don't think the solution personally is more electric cars, digging up more cobalt to get 10 pounds of cobalt minerals for the batteries that are highly explosive and volatile, and that's going to solve our issues in Sedona. I don't even understand how that could attempt to make sense to anyone. But I understand that most people have this desire to protect, and if we get to that kernel of reality and then work from there up, then we can come to the table together effectively. Right now, it's really being implemented from outside in versus inside out.
Wow. Another issue, the hospitals.
Yes, that's a huge issue. We're losing doctors, we are losing staff for the hospitals, but a lot of it, the policies in place at NAH are somewhat dysfunctional. I should be careful of saying that. I'm actually meeting tomorrow with NAH, so but I've experienced some of their policies, and they're incongruent with some things. My son hit his head, and I took him to the hospital, and they labeled him COVID positive because he complained of a headache. Now that's dysfunctional. Now, we need solutions. We need competitive markets. If NAH isn't going to provide that niche, we have to go out to other sources. I'm interested in hearing what they have to say tomorrow. But a lot of times, you're dealing with bureaucracy, and they can say one thing, but we need immediate solutions now. There's a lot of naturopaths in town. Of course, that's a different sort of metric in terms of insurance, billing. Concierge, concierge it sounds fancy. It just means your local doctor, right? And a subscription base. We have a subscription that we've subscribed to with our doctor here in town. Unfortunately, he's completely full because of the lack of doctors, but he is quite affordable, and we need to think of creative ways to find that as a solution, and I think we can, but it also goes back to housing then, because how do we house these doctors and nurses and staff for doctors? But there's a lot of people who have second homes here that won't move here permanently because they have health issues and won't make it up to Flagstaff. And we're losing Cottonwood, and we basically have nothing here in Sedona. So we have to bridge that gap. That has to come as a resource to us. We need to figure that out, especially where our median age is 65 and older.
Exactly.
How we cannot allow that to go on any longer.
So,
and just if I decide to have a child, I can't drive all the way to Flagstaff. If I'm in labor, who knows? That's so unpredictable. And any sort of emergencies that go on, you have to be helicoptered out of here. We can't lose the emergency center, and we need more doctors.
Yes, and the plans that they have with the hospital to shut down one of the facilities and put more money in.
They're putting
Flagstaff.
Lots of money in Flagstaff.
Yeah.
Flagstaff is about to be a mecca for hospital visits. But my grandmother, when in the 90s, she moved out here from Florida, and she had to leave because going to Flagstaff to see the doctor for her heart on a regular basis was not a viable option. And so in terms of concierge, this goes back to, this sounds fancy, but old school doctors did house calls. And that's something to seriously consider if that's something that we can do here in town, rather than having our community have to go meet the doctor. We're small, 19 square miles. We could have, and I've spoken to naturopaths who are willing to come down from Flagstaff and make house calls, and even do trade and barter for pay, in terms of, if I have a cousin who will pay you this to do this, and these are creative solutions that we're going to have to come up with when things potentially fall apart.
Well, I must say, I find you very articulate and very informed.
Thank you.
And so I will ask you one more question.
Okay.
And I know you're going to hit it out of the park. Why should people vote for you?
So I try to be completely transparent about who I am, what I represent, and what my values are. So I would hope that people would vote for me if that syncs up with their interests as well. I want to reform the way that Sedona has been operating metriclessly, datalessly. Lack of goal orientation is how we've gotten into the position that we're in. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I don't have 8 years of experience, but I also don't have 8 years of leading us on this beaten path into this dead end that we found ourselves into. If you're ready for change, I would hope that you'd consider voting for me.
Sounds good. Thank you, Samaire. Really appreciate you coming on and being very transparent about your position and why you would be the choice for Sedona. Thank you.
Thank you so much.